Welcome to the People Teaching People podcast. I'm so glad that you're here. I want to start with a question. When you think about a really impactful learning experience in your life, maybe it was with a teacher, a coach, a mentor, or maybe it was during a workshop, a course, or even just a conversation. What do you remember most? If you pause and think about that for a moment, it's interesting what comes up because, yes, sometimes we remember what we learned. Sometimes we remember the strategy or the idea or the thing we can now do differently. But more often than not, we remember how we felt. So today I want to talk about what I'm calling the F word of teaching and learning. And for those of you who know me at all, you know I'm not usually someone who would say that. But no, it's probably not what you think. It's feelings. I don't think we talk about this enough. When we think about learning, we tend to focus on what is visible, the structure, the outcomes, what someone will walk away knowing or being able to do. But learning is not just an intellectual experience, it is a human experience. And humans feel their way through learning just as much as they think their way through it. People don't just remember what they learned. They might not even remember it at all. They remember how it felt to learn it. There's a quote by Maya Angelou that I come back to often. People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And when I think about teaching and learning, that feels especially true. On this podcast, when I ask guests about a teacher who had an impact on them, they rarely start with the content. They talk about feeling seen, feeling supported, feeling challenged in a way that helped them grow, feeling like someone believed in them. That is what sticks. And this is something I've seen in my experience too. When I was a junior high and high school science teacher, I used to start the school year by sharing excerpts from my grade 4 diary. I wanted my students to see that even their science teacher once had doubts about their interest and ability in the subject. One of the entries I would share went like this. Dear diary, my day today was awful. I was having a wonderful day until science came around. I wish we had drama. It's my favorite subject. Science is my worst, all because of the teacher, Mrs. B. Now, I'm not going to actually say the teacher's name. And I would share that with them not to focus on the content of what I learned in science at that time, but to show how strongly I remember how it felt. And I would tell them that my hope for them was not that science would necessarily become their favorite subject, but their experience in our class would feel different, that they would feel supported, capable, and maybe even a little more open to it than they expected. And I would also remind them with a bit of a laugh that this same student who wrote that entry went on to become a science teacher, which I think says a lot about what's possible when the experience of learning shifts. And that's something I've carried with me into my work with clients and in workshops through a simple reflection tool around the feelings of learning. At its core, it is an invitation to think about the experience of learning from a few different angles. What feelings might people be bringing with them into this learning experience? What feelings might come up during the learning itself? And what feelings do you hope people leave with? Because those are not always the same. Someone might arrive feeling overwhelmed, unsure, maybe even a bit disconnected. During the learning, they might experience moments of confusion or discomfort as they are trying to make sense of something new. And ideally, they leave feeling more clear, more confident, more connected, or more supported. When we start to think about learning this way, it shifts how we design and how we show up. This is also where relevance comes in. If someone does not feel like what they are learning matters to them, if it does not connect to their life or their work or something they care about, it is really hard for them to engage. It is hard for them to feel motivated. I talk more about this in episode 54, But Why Making Learning Stick, which I will link in the show notes. But it's important to name it here too, because when something feels relevant, people do not just understand it. They lean in, and that changes the entire experience. Relevance doesn't just help people understand, it helps them care. Something else that feels really important to say here is that not all learning feels good. Learning can feel uncomfortable. It can stretch us beyond what we know. It can challenge how we think. It can make us feel vulnerable, especially when we are trying something new or realizing that we do not understand something yet. There is a space in learning when things feel a bit messy, when you are in the middle of figuring things out, and that space can feel uncertain. And sometimes what makes that discomfort even stronger is not just the learning itself, but the feeling that we need to get it right, that we are being watched or evaluated, that we should already know. And in those moments, learning can start to feel less like learning and more like performing. I talk more about this in episode 70, Learning in the Messy Middle, which I will also link in the show notes, but it definitely connects here in a really important way because this discomfort is not something we need to eliminate. It is part of the process. There is growth and learning in that space. So, this is not about making learning feel easy all the time or perfectly comfortable. It is about being intentional about how we support people through that experience. It is about creating environments where people feel able to stay in it, to keep going, even when it feels challenging, and to trust that they will find their way through it. This isn't about making learning feel good all the time. It's about making it feel possible because the feeling we are working toward is not necessarily comfort. It might be something more like feeling supported, encouraged, capable, and seen. And that sense of, I do not have this yet, but I can get there. And this is where small things make a difference. It can be as simple as how you welcome people into a space, the tone you use, or whether people feel comfortable asking questions. It shows up in whether there is space to think, pause, and process. It is in acknowledging that something might be challenging and in normalizing not knowing. It is in creating an experience where people feel like they belong in the learning, not like they have to prove themselves in it. Learning shifts when people feel like they are a part of it, not being measured by it. Because when we do not pay attention to this, learning can start to feel heavy or frustrating or performative. And when it feels that way, people disengage, sometimes quietly or without us even realizing it. So maybe this is the shift. The F word of teaching and learning is not something extra to think about. It is not something that sits on top of the learning experience. It is something that is always shaping how people experience what we are creating, whether we are intentional about it or not. And maybe it is also the difference between learning that feels transactional, like something to check off a list, where the focus is on getting through it, and learning that feels relational, where people feel connected to what they are learning, to themselves, and to each other. And when learning feels relational, it creates the conditions for something more transformational, where the learning does not just stay in that moment, but actually carries forward. It can shape how someone thinks, what they do next, how they show up. It helps them to do something new, do something differently, or do something better in a way that matters to them. Learning that is felt is learning that lasts. So I want to leave you with something to reflect on. In whatever context you are in, whether you are teaching, leading, creating something, or even just having conversations in your day to day life, how do you want people to feel? And what might help support that shift? Because at the end of the day, people might forget the exact words you said. They might forget the structure of the learning experience, but they will not forget how they felt learning with you. Thank you for joining me today on the People Teaching People podcast. If this episode resonated for you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And as you continue creating, teaching, and supporting others, I hope you stay curious about the F word of teaching and learning, that being feelings. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to continuing to learn together.